opposition to this that usually worked in secret, behind the scenes, and that was deeply, deeply invested in preserving the systems and policies that were upholding systemic racism.
So tell me a little bit about some of those organizations. Who early on stood out as one that you would often butt up against in your work?
I mean, certainly, ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council, that tends to be a pretty consistent thread throughout a lot of this work. And for those who don't know, ALEC represents somewhere in the neighborhood of 300 very large corporations and has something around 2,000 legislative members, mostly in state legislatures across the country. And they're extremely effective in getting their agenda across. And so they, around 1,000 of their model bills are introduced each year, and about 200 of them are passed into law. And they cover a range of topics, but a huge chunk of them, or a substantial chunk of them at least, really uphold or expand systemic racism. So they're one. But also in the book, I talk a lot about Charles Koch and his late brother and the other billionaires and multimillionaires that they've organized, and how they've poured tens of millions of dollars into think tanks and advocacy organizations and media outlets that have really been instrumental in making sure that we don't address some of these dynamics that have been really devastating for communities of color.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you focused on ALEC. It's been a bit since we spoke about ALEC on the show, but for people watching this that might not know, the model legislation that Jim's talking about there, very often in multiple states you'll have bills with either very similar or sometimes identical language being passed by representatives that arguably don't even necessarily know what's going on. They just know that they're supposed to pass this. And so, yeah, not surprised to see this popping up in multiple different areas, considering the number of different corporations that they represent. Now, in your book, you focus on a couple of different areas that I want to make sure that we talk about. So one has to do with the dismantling of the public school system. So tell us a little bit about how that works.
Sure, yeah. I've been working for many years with communities that were really struggling with the effects of school privatizations, this expansion of charter schools and voucher programs, and the damage that was causing, in particular, closing down public schools. And so these were really traumatizing events for these communities. And then again, I started digging into who was funding this, and kept running the same set of names. So what I did for the book was I just picked 10 names, just some that are well known, like the Gates Foundation and the Walton Foundation and folks like that, but then also some that maybe haven't received a lot of publicity for work in this space, like Koch brothers. So I just picked 10, and I tracked their donations to 50 organizations that have been really instrumental in pushing this agenda forward. So this is just the tip of the iceberg of all the money going to this, but just those 10 people funding 10 organizations or 50 organizations. That was $3.2 billion that I was able to find. And so this is undoubtedly a billionaire-led effort that's having really, really dramatic effects in communities of color across the country, and in many cases causing extreme harm. And I don't think we've talked about it enough as an example of systemic racism.
Yeah, and especially some of the individuals that you've identified there, like, a lot of the people, especially watching this show, are not going to be surprised to find out that the Koch brothers are involved in this, but the idea that the Gates are involved in this, that Mark Zuckerberg, who's occasionally gotten, positive press cycles for donating money to schools and things like that, that you've identified both of them being involved in this, and obviously they have a lot of money, so that can have a very outsized effect on this.
Yeah, absolutely. We think of them very differently. Mark Zuckerberg and Bill Gates on one side, and Koch brothers and some others on the other side. But in actuality, in this space, they're funding the same organizations, and so I think they have very different ideologies that are driving their efforts. But the impact in many cases is the same, and I think somebody like Bill Gates, I don't doubt his good intent in doing some of the things that he's doing, but I also think he has to be held accountable for the fact that he's contributing to this other agenda that he probably doesn't agree with. The Koch brothers wanting to actually dismantle the public school system entirely. I don't think that's Bill Gates' intent, but he's contributing to it probably unwittingly, and I think he needs to account for that.
Interesting. So I mean, is it ignorance? Is it they give so much money to so many different people that they can't necessarily vet everything? It seems like, especially if this is not one-time donations that you're identifying, if this is sustained support, it seems weird that they wouldn't necessarily know it's going to be money.
Yeah, no, I think, they've come to it for different reasons, right? I mean, there are some folks who came to charter schools and in particular because they wanted to disrupt the education system, and they saw some of the real long-standing, legitimate flaws in our public school system and wanted to do something different. And then there's other people who saw vouchers as a way to do something they've been trying to do for 60, 70 years, which is dismantle this public system, and that charter schools were sort of a way into that. It was a way to get a toehold into the system. So they came at it in different ways, but the long and the short of it is, because of what they've done, schools are closing down in huge numbers in Black and brown communities, and if you follow this process and this agenda to its logical end, it really does threaten the educational opportunities of everyone.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Cast or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want with a range of...
I'm going to comment on that one. You see, racism is being exposed. And you hear what that man just said. That's why black people want to segregate. Because that's an agenda. It came out of his own mouth. He's a civil rights lawyer. He went and got done. Sometimes God has to use someone to look like the Hmong who walks around like the Herod in the land. And he exposes it. We don't pray, but we gotta pray against this. Ain't about you. It can't be no. We can unify with one thing. We can pray against these billionaires. That's on the agenda, and God will bring down the kingdoms for what they're doing. See, it's always been like that. It don't matter who's controlling. Who's controlling. That's why black media is exposing it. That's why you see all these different black personalities exposing it. Because if they don't expose it, and that's why they're trying to figure out a way to control the internet, to shut the voices down. But you see, just because there's other ways to get the truth out, and God would make sure that when there's ever injustice to any group of people on the land, particularly one who's been persecuted for over 500 years, and that's the black man, black woman, black child, he will expose it. There's nothing you can do to stop it from being exposed. There's no way you can put anybody up front to try to say that we're not part of it, or I think it's a delusion. You can't hide truth. You can't hide it. Either you stop it in one area, it's going to come up in another area. And see, ever since technology has ever made, the camera has been the open eye to everything. When everybody, regardless of race, color, creed, economics, when they got this is the key. See, their technology, what they thought was to try to control the masses, God has used it for his glory to turn against them, the ones who do evil. So you see, God you can't outbox God, you can't outthink God, because he's gonna let his people know from all walks of life. Now that man exposed it. So my suggestion to you is you pray against the billionaires of what they're doing. You ask God to bring down their kingdoms. And that should be your prayer. That's how you deal with the billionaires. Because God has a kingdom that's richer than all the billionaires on this planet. and he would expose and destroy. He knocked out the. Let me tell you this. He knocked out the civilizations of Egypt. He knocked out the civilizations to the point that the only way they can find us is the pharaohs, is that they gotta dig up the caves and the monuments and the pyramids to find the pharaohs. They wiped out Egypt, and it didn't look like the Egypt it was over 2,000 years ago. But they thought they were a god because they were billionaires and millionaires on the planet, and they thought they could, even though they were controlling the agriculture and resources, but one of the things, they grabbed slaves, and when they grabbed a particular slaves, they had no idea that the ones that they were grabbing, they were put to 450 years of rigorous labor, that this was going to happen. So if they think the billionaires think that they can control their kingdoms is coming down. And the Gates and the Koch brothers and all these other people, may I say this to you, your kingdom is coming down. You finding racism? You think you're going to hold on so long? Someone should have told you about the pharaohs in the Bible. See, they thought they had kingdoms too. They was billionaires and millionaires at that time. Your kingdoms is in any other person whose agenda, and you can influence the agenda, but your kingdoms is coming down. And I hope many people like me will stay in intercessory prayer to bring your kingdoms down. That's up on this agenda, a satanic agenda. You can't destroy what God has put in the earth. You're coming down. Because in the end, you think you're going to win by what you're doing, but your kingdoms are coming down. Your wealth will be diminished. Curse is going to be, heap of coals is going to be on generations ahead. It's coming. What you do in the dark, God is going to expose in the light. You think you're going to find some way to keep the oppression going? You think you're going to find a way to keep this up for a long time, for generation to generation? You have no idea what's about to come to the earth. You have no idea. You can't stop it. You can't stop it. Your destruction is around the corner. It's not going to be at the hands of man. It's coming from eternity. Keep playing with us as a people. Keep doing what you're doing, because you only put pounding judgments are pounding against you as we speak. The court of heaven have heard the call. You're in trouble, and you don't even know it. You have done this to people, different groups of people. You oppress people. You cause you're trying to play in God's court. You're trying to play in the one that spoke to the universe and think that you are God's. That your wealth will be meaningless. God's going to burn all this up. And those who betrayal and be the Judases, you're going to pay too. Don't matter what party you serve. No matter if it's on the left side or the right side. Your kingdoms is coming down. Let me get it clear. And I pray that this prayer, your kingdoms are coming down as we speak. Your father, the devil, Satan, is going to be destroyed. The book says it. You keep following your father, the devil, the liar, the accuser of the brother. Your kingdoms, tell them billionaires, the kingdoms are coming down. And I'm going to pray, and I hope there's many people that will pray like me, that God will take down your kingdoms and distribute to the wealth, just like he did with the children of that day. You have no idea what you're doing. You can't stop everything on the internet. Because someone has to. Because you made it technical. You put everything online. Everybody has to go because of COVID. People are scared to be interacting public because public information. So you think that you've done this? You made software. You brought the technology that we deal with manual work. The Social Security, every governmental system and healthcare system, judicial system, every system in the world is operated on the internet. And you think truth is operated by the internet? See, because you was controlling the masses. But I laugh at you wise people who think it's you so wise, because you're not superior because you got billions of dollars, because you're educated. You're not superior. You're coming down. You're coming down. You just don't know it. And I pray when his kingdom come into earth, he's going to deal with you. And your weapons, your technology will never, and you think you're going to fight, they'll turn around, and and that's what your next plan is. Satan got you messed up, because you don't know what you're doing in that realm. You think you can stop it? That's why you got your stuff out there in the space. You can't stop it. You can't stop the eternal one that's coming. That you've done all the evil and injustices in the earth. You're going to pay for this. And I'm going to be praying. I'm just maybe a little poor man in my saddle, but that's all right, because I have the kingdom in me that pray against you in your plan. And I pray that other people have the same plan to pray against you and bind at what you're trying to do in the secrets and the darkness of the poor, and get rid of the population. You want to play in God's court and do what you do? Well, I'm praying against you. And I pray that the Almighty God deal with you. I pray that he will tear your generation of your family up and take your wealth away, just like he did with the pharaohs. You will be buried into a legend. And in 100 years by now, and all the Gates and other people like that, they're gonna have to bury you to find you, because you're gonna be knocked out of existence unless some archaeology in the future, as long as God got the planet on the axles. You think you laughing, but I'm laughing at you and people like you who sit in them corporations and offices. Your kingdom is coming down. Your kingdom is coming down. And I pray that the sons of God will come forth and speak this. I pray that the sons of God will be protected, that will be rising the earth to speak against this. These evil kingdoms, your evil kingdoms, just like in the days of your forefathers, done the same thing. But you see, in the end, you see what God did. The one that stand, the one that spoke everything in the universe. That's why I laugh. Your kingdom is coming down. Ladies and gentlemen, those who are not aware of this, stand in agreement with prayer with me. Let's bring down the kingdom. Those who have a righteous spirit, let's bring down the kingdom and go in intercessory and prayer. That's how we deal with this. Thank you.